Hi folks, today I'll be talking about my favorite board games for new parents. So if you can't tell by the bags under my eyes, we recently became parents, so that has definitely changed a lot of things in our lives, but still being able to game is something that we want to keep doing, and especially to pass along to our kid. Now, especially when you have an infant, there are some changes you might need to make as far as how you approach playing board games. So what do I think makes a good board game for new parents? One, it can be played one-handed. So if you need to be holding your kid, they're at an age where they just want to be held, they don't want to be put down. As long as you've got one free hand, hey, you can play it. And if you're able to put them in a baby carrier, even better. The second thing is that it is a board game where other players can potentially move your pieces for you without kind of spoiling the strategy. So this is something where you can, if you really do need two hands with the kid, like for example you're feeding them, you can continue playing without having to completely stop and step away from it. Which brings me to my third point, which is games that you can step away from, where it's easy to kind of, okay, we really need to stop, give all our full attention to the infant, and then we can come back once maybe they're calmed down or down for a nap. But games where it's easy to remember where you were, or kind of write a quick note to yourself, have a first player marker, something like that, where it's easy to kind of step back into that game. Also, games that are fast, so games that are not going to take like 3 hours to play, and also don't have a super involved setup or breakdown, so it's not going to take you quite as long to get into the game. If you only have shorter amounts of time, you probably want to be spending more of that time playing the board game than setting up the board game. And finally, rules that are easy to remember and follow. Now, if there is a board game that you have the rules memorized completely, I think that falls into that category. All the games I'm going to be talking about have pretty straightforward rules. There aren't a whole lot of things you have to do on your turn. Most of them are kind of, you either get to pick between 2-3 things, or there is one thing that you do every turn. And so this makes it, when you are sleep deprived, you are able to remember how to play those games. You're not having to keep going back to the rules going, shoot, I forgot what I'm supposed to be doing on my turn. It just makes it a lot easier. A big thanks to all of our patrons, especially Sean. If you want to help support our channel, you can head on over to patreon.com/rollforinitiative and check out the perks of being a patron. All right, so let's get into my specific favorite board games. And most of these games, if not all of them, we have done reviews on elsewhere, so I will link to those full reviews if you're more interested in finding out about those games. But I'm just going to kind of talk about why I think this fits into this kind of good new parent category. Bang! This is, we have the dice version of this. I'm not so sure about the card version. This is a really great big group game. So if you have a bunch of family over, or are getting together with your friends who game, this is a great one because while it does involve rolling dice, so you do need at least one free hand, it's fast-paced, it's easy to set up, and there aren't a whole lot of things you have to do on your turn. Potentially even you could have somebody roll for you and you say which dice you are going to keep, but just rolling a couple of dice you can do one-handed. You don't necessarily need both hands. So, bang! Next up is Forbidden Island, and kind of any of the cooperative games I feel like fall into this. So this is a fairly quick to set up game, and because it is cooperative, it makes it very easy. If you aren't able to move your pieces, you can talk to the other players and say, I want to move my piece here. And actually, oftentimes with this cooperative games, you end up talking to the other players about what it is that you want to be doing on your turn anyhow. So it is a lot more of that collaborative aspect where you might not even have to be keeping as close of track of what's going on. So as far as like remembering and paying attention, you can step away and potentially have some of the other players kind of play your piece if you need to step away and then come back to the game. Next up, we have Splendor. This is a game that is very easy to play one-handed. Potentially even for a while was playing it and just saying, hand me this piece, hand me these pieces. It's a fast-paced game, so you can probably actually play a couple of games of it in one sitting, or just one if you really only have that half an hour time window where the baby's going to be calm enough for you to play. Again, really easy. There are only a couple of things that you can do on your turn, and it also doesn't require a whole ton of table space. We actually brought it to the hospital with us and played it on one of the little hospital table tray things. And yeah, that was fun, and the nurses thought that was absolutely adorable. Next up, we have Sagrada. Again, this is a very fast-paced game. The turns are pretty simple as far as what you do on your turn. There is a little bit more setup to this game, but that's something that perhaps the person who isn't holding the baby can take over some of the setup as far as rolling the dice and placing their initial placement on the table. And all of that. So that's one thing, if it comes around to your turn and you need to roll the dice, maybe that's something you kind of hand off to another player to take over that aspect for you, but it's not really going to affect how the game is played. Next, we have Parks. So this is a very kind of chill, relaxing game to play, which I think is nice for new parents. It's easy to set up. The rules are very simple, as well as the rules are kind of written out on the game pieces. So if you need to remember, what do I do with the camera? You flip it over and it's right there. So it's very easy to remember. Again, it's something that you can ask another player, can you move my piece to the waterfall? And then they can kind of move the things around for you if you do not have a free hand, or it is something that is easy to play with a free hand. And that's actually something I kind of forgot to mention earlier. I think games where you have a bunch of cards or something, especially if it's something that you need to keep private, is going to be a little bit more difficult to play as a new parent. If you have one of those card holder things, that I think would solve if you do really enjoy deck building games or games that are going to have some kind of hand that you need to hold. And if you're wanting to introduce your kids to gaming later on, I know those are really useful for younger kids who maybe can't hold as many cards as easily, but are old enough to be able to play those games. So yeah, that's one thing I kind of forgot to mention with the one-handed earlier on. I think the deck and card games are going to be a little bit more difficult to play. Next up, we have Cerro. Again, a very zen game. While this does have a kind of cards hand that you have to hold, it's just 3 and they're tiles, so potentially you can kind of lay them down and just pick them up off the table one by one. If you've got something you can kind of set them up in, great. It's a very fast game to play. It's a very easy game to play. And there is a first player token, so potentially if you're not able to finish the game, you could set that down and remember, okay, whose turn is it next once we're able to come back to it. And finally, we have Takanoko. So this is a game that has a little bit more setup, a little bit more things involved in it, and it might be a little bit of the parent advanced. It's going to be a little bit more complicated to play, but because there aren't really very many hidden things, you do have some cards, but it's not a very complicated hand. You can kind of say to some of the other players, okay, move my piece here, I want to do this. It's a little bit, again, of a slightly longer game, but it runs probably only about 45 minutes. So maybe if you've got a kid that's a little bit more content to be in a kid seat next to you or in a wrap, you can play this maybe a little bit more of a two-handed game than a single-handed game, but perhaps the parenting advanced. So there you go. Those are my favorite new parent games. To any of my fellow gamer parents out there, are there any games that I didn't talk about, or things about games that make them really good for especially new parents, parents with infants and babies? Let me know down in the comments below so we can kind of all help each other, because I think still continuing to find those times where you can game, you can do the things that you enjoy is really important for your mental health, as well as it's going to introduce gaming at a much earlier age to your kids. Even if they aren't able to game, they'll get to watch you game, and it's a fun stimulation for them, as far as you can show them the pieces and tell them the different colors or explain what you are doing. And even if they aren't quite old enough to understand any of it, you're still talking to them and having that fun interaction. If there are any other kind of parenting themed videos that you would like to see us tackle, any topics, let me know in the comments below as well, because we're definitely figuring out how to be gamer parents as well, and ways that we can kind of introduce gaming to our kid. So thank you so much for watching. Hope you liked this video. If you liked it, and subscribe so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos, and we'll see you next time on Roll for Initiative. Bye. The one opportunity I have to film, and everyone is mowing their lawn right now. Sorry about the sound.